Good morning. Good morning, everybody. 9 o'clock, 1 after 9. Time to start with this first session of this Thursday. Even it's the fourth day of the conference for a lot of us. I'm very thankful of the interest for this session because, and I wanted to be here this morning because this is a very important session. This is something that we have, it's part of the recommendations we sent out to Parliament and Council. It's also part of the multi-annual work program of the Maintenance Implementation Group for INSPIRE. So one of the actions is better coordination, meaning a better alignment of INSPIRE with other policies, with eGovernment, a better coordination within the member states to get the environmental data out. So I'm very happy that member states today, because it's mostly member states, are already giving us an idea of the actions taken at national level to fill in and to comply to this recommendation on INSPIRE, because we haven't had an action under the MIG. So I'm very happy that we have this presentation today. So we get kind of an insight, I don't know how deep we will go, from Germany, Slovakia, Spain, the Netherlands and Slovenia today. So I'm very happy that we got this kind of distribution across Europe as well, from different kind of cultural backgrounds, countries with cultural backgrounds. So I'm very happy. And without any further ado, because I don't want to take any time away from the speakers, I would like to give the word to Marcus to kick off this session. Please, Marcus, be my guest. I'm going to open your presentation.
Oh, that's a great service.
Yeah, yes. I saw people fiddling around with it yesterday, so I had a small training this morning.
It looks good. Don't start it. Don't start it. Thanks a lot. It's an honor for me to open the session this morning. Welcome to everyone to Room Amsterdam this morning. It's about alignment of INSPIRE with national and European and global policies and initiatives. Let's have a look at it first from a federal structured country with its challenges. This look was prepared together with my colleagues Mr. Schulz and Mr. Wurihausen, who are attending this session 2 this morning. They are from the Working Group on Soil Protection, and Mr. Schulz from the Working Group on Soil Protection and from the Steering Office on Geospatial Data Infrastructure in Germany. My colleague and me decided to call this presentation Balancing INSPIRE and Political Interests in Federal Structures. I don't want to take the classical overview as a table of contents, but this little mobily setting up. We have political interests on different levels. On the left side we have to fulfill. We have given administrative structures on the right side. You will see them showing up there. And we have a legal INSPIRE framework in the middle, which guides our ways. I will start with a look on political and technical coordination done in Germany. Numerous thematic networks have been set up and steered by thematic conferences like the environmental one. In the following, we have a short look on the overall challenges and the status quo of balancing based on the water reporting experiences. Next step will be highlighting some aspects from the national, legal, political, organizational point of view as it is developed by our steering committee. And then finally, we take a glance look at some examples of soil data provision and how usability and benefits could be achieved there. The German National Steering Committee on Spatial Data Infrastructure covers the federal and 16 state administrations and includes the municipalities too. The coordination office we have covers permanent tasks, including the contact with the Commission. Special activities are given to working groups. The structure was set up before INSPIRE started, in 2003 even. Representatives of the federal and the state governments have to consider different thematic themes, as you can see there, and different interests. INSPIRE became part of this structure in 2007, first focused on Annex 1 reference data, and it changed when in the setting when Annex 2 and 3 data came up and had to be provided. Lots of different agencies on administrative levels became responsible for collecting, maintaining, and providing these data, varying but established procedures and techniques were used, and so on. The importance of this national thematic working groups grew. The Conference of Environmental Secretaries, as you can see here, is split in different thematic working groups, even a horizontal working groups, like it is shown in the water affairs, where there is a horizontal group responsible for data management and reporting, which was set up and which is, has to deal with all the Inspire affairs too, considering the water things. The standing thematical conferences we have, as you see in the bottom, they are shown by abbreviations. They are connected with different Inspire themes here. We don't go into detail, but some conferences, like for example for building and planning or agriculture or trade, they are responsible for several themes. Political interests cover a huge bundle of themes. For this slide, let's look at balancing on European level when talking about the water affairs, especially in this slide. 5 questions, I think, have to be answered that way. The first question, why do we supply data? Protection of water management in the Water Framework Directive is covered by the purpose as it is written in Article 1 of the Inspire Directive, Community Environmental Policy. So they are both in line. The next question, what data exactly should be delivered? EEA and the European Commission have supported this process by developing a priority list. Thanks for that, by the way. It's a first step. But for the question which formats, the third question shown there is a big left between the Inspire Directive and lots of thematical directives, which has to be worked out. Which formats of data have to be provided? EEA and the Commission, as well as the Member States, have to work on aligning this. The fourth question, when to provide reporting data. We have the situation by the Inspire Directive that it has to be reported latest in 2020. Reporting based on the Water Framework Directive gives circles which come along again in 2021 and 2017. And so all these questions lead to the conclusion, are the different directives in line or not? On this slide, you see there is a setting of common national rules and strategies where our work is based on. The legal implementation is given by 16 state laws and the federal law. We have, for the first time, by this law, a common legal definitions and aims to set up on national level. Additionally to the legal framework, we have a political framework given by the German National Spatial Data Strategy, which is endorsed by the Committee of the Secretaries of State responsible for information technology. We have an administrative agreement which gives an organizational frame between the states, the federal government, and the municipalities, and we have a technical framework given by a concept on the GDI architecture in Germany. As we have to take care for providing data as is, and this challenge is mostly done, the National Steering Committee set up an action plan in 2014 to boost the Inspire implementation in Germany. These actions aim at better implementing the strategic objectives, providing data efficiently and as homogeneously as possible for Inspire, assuring quality and providing experience at the European level, and setting up knowledge and benefits for national applications. We cannot go in detail with all the individual actions set up in that plan, but there are 2 actions I highlighted here. A common view on Inspire-affected data sets has to be set up, and to identify and close thematic gaps we have to do. We had done a couple of monitoring cycles so far with considerable results in the last years. You have seen there are around about 15,000 data sets, 22,000 services which were provided from several hundred public authorities. These numbers rose significantly since 2012, pushed by the upcoming Inspire deadlines in 2013, but they don't show the individual developments in the 16 German states. And they don't provide any conclusions whether these are the data really needed and covered by the Inspire directive or not. These different strategies of providing services are not taken into account too. As a consequence, the action plan led to a list of several thousand data sets which has to be checked set by set. And doing that, we recognized there is not always a common view on the question, is the data set relevant for Inspire or not, and we had to do more on awareness building. One cluster of these datasets is the cluster on soil protection. Soil data are not part of the community legislation. The Commission had withdrawn its initiative on the Soil Framework Directive in 2014. Therefore, quite in contrast to water management, there are no community reporting obligations which have to be fulfilled, which means use cases, for example, have to be modeled in the context of national regulation, not like in the water thing, or international programs and agreements which are there. This situation is similar to other fields like land survey, urban planning, or traffic planning. So that's why a joint editing group of the working groups on soil protection finally, and the State Geological Surveys has taken care of this dataset cluster and looking for applications and inspire relevance of these datasets as it is mentioned in the outcome of the action plan. The variety of spatial soil data covered by INSPIRE is small and is mainly performed by the soil protection authorities and the State Geological Surveys. The latter ones provide regional and assessment maps as well as soil property or function maps. Other ones are about potential soil erosion or the soil state survey, not covered by INSPIRE as information on contamination or for agricultural use. Therefore, it's only a small fraction of data sets in comparison to that ones which have to be looked at by the water community or the natural protection community. The working program of this editing group I mentioned is set up as follows. First, survey capture and analysis of existing soil data sets in all 16 German states and on the federal level covered by INSPIRE. Then take in and put stress on parameters which are of immediate interest for soil evaluation and protection. Agree on data sets for issues which have to be supported by reliable long-term data sets. Coordinate between the federal states about the requirements for soil data, methods of analyzing soil data, definitions of data structures and terminologies. The result and recommendations of this editing group have to be endorsed by the standing working group and the steering committee on soil protection, as you have seen on slide 2, and then have to be communicated back to the steering committee on geospatial data infrastructure in Germany, as you have shown on the second slide 2. When talking about the objectives to be pursued with the provision of INSPIRE soil datasets, there were two basically different opinions which came up in the editing group. The one view A, is a more defensive one, which was we have to avoid or minimize expenses when implementing INSPIRE, which means let's define the compulsory minimum of spatial datasets, which definitely is INSPIRE affected and which might be very small. And let's only provide technical interoperability in a formal sense, no matter if contents are comparable. This way wouldn't benefit from any advantage or additional usability next to existing data sets. The second view is a more progressive one on the right side, which was we should find a way to gain long-term benefits, which means let's take the long-term chance of value-added content and better harmonization of national soil data sets. The editing group currently assesses both options, which were when working on recommendations and arrangements for spatial data which are useful for soil protection issues. Here on this slide, you can see an example of the current situation of publishing soil data. There are 3 parts you can see on the left side and on the right side, and the one in the middle, more or less, they are a little different. None of these parts of presentation is wrong. But as you see, the natural yield potential is provided with different resolutions, different design, and impression is not very good at the moment. We want to overcome this. What are the conclusions out of this first outcomes we have in the situation we are in? Let's go on this last slide. There is what do we learn. Balancing needs a structured overview of European and national data sets, as we did as an outcome of the action plan. Awareness of European and national INSPIRE objectives, which is not so sure for everyone so far. We have to work on that. Interdisciplinary networks, very, very important, and structured processes. Balancing follows. The next step, theme-specific legal requirements. Hopefully we have them on different levels. And programmatic aims, not only reporting requirements. There can be lots of other requirements. The divided responsibilities we have in Germany on the different administrative levels, they are there. We have to deal with it. And balancing brings interoperability, much more usability. We have long-term benefits of harmonized data, as we think in Germany, and we have a contribution to sustainable environmental management by that way. That's it. I thank for your attention now. I hope I made it almost in 12 or 13 minutes.
Perfect on time, Marcus. Thank you very much. You put a lot of information in these 15 minutes, and I can imagine that the audience already has questions. So I think I'll open the floor for one or maximum two questions, because we got 5 presentations. This session is really packed. So maybe one question from the audience. Are we awake already? 9 o'clock in the morning. It's 40 of the conference. Mark, of course you are awake. Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcus. Do I have right to understand that you are waiting for more data specifications at European level to help you to manage the different states?
You are asking if we await more data specification. Did I understand right? No, we can live with the specifications as they are there now. That's all.
Okay, I guess I've got a question as well. If somebody else has a question. No? Because you touched upon several things. One of the things is the identification of data sets. You are, together with the federal states, identifying the data sets that are relevant for Inspire. That's something that might come back. We already had a discussion in the workshops earlier this week, and it's also part of the action on the priority data sets. So it would be quite, if you could briefly share with us how you identify, which criteria are you using to identify that a data set on national or regional level is an Inspire data set, because I know that a lot of member states have difficulties with identifying data sets that are within the scope of Inspire.
I think it will be a long-term. It will be a long-term process. As I said, the situation in the soil community is we have no reporting obligations on the soil data, so it's very hard to identify which concrete data set we have in Germany might fulfill the theme. Which one is it? Land use Annex 3, number 3 or 4. We make our mind about it from a national point of view, where we think having a look at maybe programs. Yesterday morning in one session, a colleague from the region Mayenne in France mentioned a kind of initiative on soil the European Union is doing or starting. There might be some hints to identify data sets which are needed on the European level. Otherwise, if we don't find this international or European hints, we will take a national view, and we will work on that further on.
I think we have a responsibility to just keep in touch and get as much as possible the good practices from the member states and share it with the rest of you. I think that could be an outcome of this subgroup of the list of priority data sets as well. So thank you very much, Martin, Marcus, for this presentation. So I would like to invite Martin China from the Slovak Republic, Ministry of Environment, for the Towards the Synergy of Inspire with eGovernment presentation, which highlights another part of the synergy and coordination with other policies. eGovernment. Please, Martin.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay. First of all, thanks a lot for being able to share with you just few hints from what's currently going on or is about to happen in Slovakia in connection to those 3 sort of keywords which are mentioned in the title. The interesting thing about the situation in Slovakia and why we thought that it might make sense to share these few bits with you is that we have certain national specific, of course, certain historical heritage, and particularly, at least for me, quite curious or interesting thing is that whilst in Slovakia the topics of Inspire and eGovernment are not new, they are already some time on the scene. Let's say spatial dimension was not dealt in the past in such an intensive way how it is becoming to happen these days. And also going towards the open data concept and related initiatives behind, I have to say that I'm actually quite shocked what's happening these days, because if you would ask 1 or 2 years ago someone what is the situation, I think the answer would be almost zero. And currently this is one of the strongest words used by almost everybody. Of course, there are some motivations, some reasons why it is as it is. And with this really few slides, I would like to point out on certain things which we think might be of some interest. So for the Inspire perspective, I tried to somehow create some sort of reflection towards what we received a few days ago from the colleagues from European Commission about the initiative called Inspire Country Fishes. Maybe some of you are aware what is it. More or less in a nutshell, it's sort of summary of the observations collected by the European Commission from the available Inspire-related resources, and providing some sort of feedback to the member states. What is the perception of the European Commission, in the sense that there is a dedicated part in these small documents where I also highlighted some recommendations for the member states. And for us, this is a very important document, and we are very happy to see that this initiative took place, and we do hope it will continue, and we will have this kind of feedback. And with that, I try to highlight certain things which happened recently, and of course, not all the things are as we would like to have them. Already those we managed to do give us quite good feeling, and actually a justification that all this effort makes sense. So for this context of the session, the important thing is that whilst in Slovakia we managed to get the dedicated law for the Inspire transposition, recently we had to make some amendments, some modifications, also in connection, for example, to the OpenData initiative. And now we are really in the phase that we are trying to bring all these new things in the life. And knowing that there are also ongoing these other two initiatives, we are at this moment somewhere on the beginning of the process of communicating with relevant stakeholders. That has also impact on the topic of data sharing, where we were a long time waiting for some sort of common discussion about what should be the ideal licensing framework in Slovakia. All of a sudden we saw that actually if we will not do something, more or less nothing will happen. And we were quite happy that we managed to set up some sort of participatory approach and to come up with a set of templates and examples how the licenses for the Inspire data and services should look like. Currently they are in the level of recommendation, so we will see in the near future if we will succeed with this level, because we started with the obligation, but there were some objective reasons why we end up on the, let's say, recommendation level. From the content point of view, as was already mentioned, we understood that if we want to promote the idea of Inspire, first of all, we have to tie up the stuff in-house, I mean, in environmental domain. And if we will succeed, then we have much stronger arguments to go outside to other domains and look, if you will do all these things, you can actually make your life easier and also be more visible for the others. Therefore, these Inspire priority datasets are something what we are trying to keep quite high focus on and do also from our side the best we can. For time being, we managed to create the Inspire metadata for all identified priority datasets. And we were also quite happy to use certain tools provided by the Commission, particularly for the Inspire monitoring this year, where in Slovakia we first time used the Inspire dashboard. And I have to admit that I was a bit worried on the beginning of the year, because a colleague of mine who was doing this before, he had to change the place. And I knew that before it was a relatively quite challenging task, but now with the help of these new techniques and also colleagues from the Commission and EEA, we managed to do it in the way that actually we are now understanding, and in this sense we are pioneers on national level, showing that if you have already automatically processable infrastructure, you can get very easily interesting outcomes and statistics which you can use also for your work to promote what you are trying to do on your site. And the last thing we are trying to now really focus is also effort to test the available resources from the, let's say, compliance point of view, and prepare some reports for the stakeholders and go back to them and ask them to fix those issues. So this is something what we are trying to do now, and also we are quite happy to see this effort with the new Inspire validator, and we do hope that it will continue to let's say complete the package and to use these tools. Really briefly, for the eGovernment in Slovakia, it's legally based initiative. So we have a law. It's interesting that so far we used to have two phases. 2000. Well, I think the first one finished last year. Now the second one is forced into 2020. And really, during the first phase, the sort of visibility of spatial geospatial domain was quite limited. Now it's changing. We are very happy to see, but at the same time, we have relatively tough discussions with people responsible for that topic. Particularly, it's Deputy Prime Minister's office, which has a relatively very strong power on national level. And to find a way what should be the best channel, how to actually ensure that what's done on the Inspire side will fit into the expectations of the eGovernment. So we have some common principles, we have some differences, which you can see, and I would like to just highlight the one which is actually pointing to the using of only one principle, which is trying to really ensure the effectiveness in the public sector, and also using the unique and persistent identifiers, because this is something what we already see that in other countries is a relatively significant issue. And we have a very fair base, legal and technical on a level, but now we are really in the moment when we are starting to implement the things, and it delivers us some challenges. So let's see how this will continue. Of course, there are differences, and we do hope that also hearing your experience and taking part on the European discussion, we will be able to overcome those. For the open data, it's a bit different setup where we have just the political decision. But it's interesting that, as I said, in the past there was almost no one talking about that. Now we have three players on, let's say, centralized level. Everybody has their own role, and sometimes it's quite interesting to see their coordination. And then you, who are supposed to somehow promote the Inspire and geospatial domain, it's very challenging to make sure that you convince all of them that things which shall be done in near future will be consistent and will really ensure this effort to eliminate the burden on the data providers, not to provide the data for this initiative in various channels, but provide the data once and then distribute them where they are needed. What's good, we have a OGC action plan for the next 3 years, where there is a very huge amount of tasks to be done. And the one which really relates to our field is related with the open information. And as you can see, there are already some sub areas, and it's not only about the open data, but there is a very strong initiative about open software, and also some basic registers, which we really do hope that in near future we will be able actually to use and link the spatial dimension to those registers and actually databases. What's very important is this point, where the people behind the OGP, they are trying to approach the the society in general and actually collect some user requirements in the sense that so far what we received, it showed us that there is a relatively high demand also for the geospatial data. There are also some weakness when you go into the detail, but it gives us also some sort of perception that how we shall set up the priorities in preparation of the data, and also make sure the data are prepared in the way that if there are identified certain domains, we will really put some pressure on those data providers, even if it's our case, like meteorological and climatic data. So we will really do something in the direction. Last slide is the one where I was trying to somehow summarize what we consider these days as things to be done among the first. So definitely finish this sort of abstract participatory discussions and finish the documents, finish the guidelines, and then really focus on the content and describe the content. I was very happy to see yesterday some presentations pointing out to actually exchange of the metadata across the domains. This is something what we really consider as a very important thing to do in near future. And also to make sure that if we are trying to publish data, harmonize data, we will look on those where there is the high demand. For the challenges, I think I should already finish. I would just pick up the first one, which is calling for expectation to provide data as a reference data. And in Slovakia, although it's somehow defined in legislation, it creates also certain sort of tension on data providers, because when we speak with responsible colleagues about the meaning of reference data, they very often use the term data used for legal purposes. And it comes to the quality of data, and many data providers, so far they publish the data as they are, but they didn't want it to guarantee, respectively they wanted to guarantee responsibility for the data only to the certain level. So this is something what we will have to clarify in near future to make sure that it will not create a burden. It will motivate the data producers to even improve their quality. And let's hope that this will be not the sort of barrier for the making data more available. And the last thing I'd like to highlight here is the semantic interoperability, because I was very happy to hear from various presentations here that this is something where we should really spend some time to make sure that whatever encoding the data are made available, the semantic inside will be harmonized and same. So data will be then easier usable for the additional added value generation. So that's it from my side. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer. And really, we are just on the beginning, but we do hope that there will be some tangible outcomes in the near future. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Martin. So I really want to thank you for your appreciation of the country fishes, and we are also very happy to see that you're already working with them, and it kind of guides your actions in the future to improve your Inspire implementation. So we're very happy that is a good instrument at national level as well to be used to plan your resources for the future. So very good. You already said a lot of things as well on one's only very important, the alignment, the open data, eGovernment, semantic interoperability, which is one of the main aspects and forces of power of the Inspire directive, together with the open or the access to data. So I can imagine that you touched upon several items that might have interest of other people, and you might have some questions. And I think we have time for 2 minutes for 1 or 2 questions of the audience. Glenn.
Thank you for your interesting presentation. I was wondering, could you say a few more words about the alignment between, on one hand, the OGP action plan, and on the other hand, you were talking about the open data strategy that was still under development. But are those the same people involved, or are those, because those are 2 separate documents, but are they aligned? Are there particular efforts to align them, and how?
Yeah, luckily these 2 agendas are on 2 different authorities. The good thing is that there is currently established working group which is preparing the document, and there are both are represented. And it's interesting sometimes to see, despite of the amount of documents already made available, that when it comes to the detail and, for example, a roadmap and concrete actions are discussed, there still used to come some surprises. So with that respect, I think the good thing is that more or less timing is same everywhere. So in case of OGP and eGov open data related activities, more or less the roadmap is the same. Yeah, it's quite interesting to see that sometimes we as the people from outside have to just mention certain details which are already defined in existing documents, and asking the colleagues not to create something new what is already defined. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Martin. Other questions? Okay. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Martin. Then the next speaker, we welcome Paloma Abad from the National Geographical Institute of Spain. Will highlight us the implementation of the Catalogue function in Spain for Inspire.
Hello. I'm responsible for monitoring in Spain. I would like to show the last monitoring and to compare it with the new monitoring. In Spain, monitoring has changed a lot over the last year. In 900, in 9,000, the spatial dataset was 4,000, and the last year the spatial dataset is about 300 spatial dataset. Well, we know the directive requires member states to monitor and report, and the member states should establish a list of spatial dataset and spatial data service. And you know, the monitoring is powerful tool for Inspire to know the status of the implementation, to identify responsible for spatial dataset, to coordinate the spatial datasets in a country, and so on. Well, the first step was to identify the responsibles in Spain. In Spain, there are 40 or 35 responsibles in national, regional, and local SDIs. And the responsible for a spatial dataset should know how to answer the question. These questions are very, these questions, they aren't easy. For example, in 2000, to answer your spatial dataset view and download wasn't difficult, because yes, my spatial dataset is downloaded because I have a save file on my website. When the second question is, what dataset should we report? What is more relevant for reporting? But the Commission and directive say a few information. For example, a list can and want to be established through the decision of European Commissions. Member states should define the list at national level, taking into account all data custodians that provide dataset or service that can contribute to the infrastructure of Inspire. I have a lot of questions. For example, one spatial dataset for thin and major level and national coverage? There will be 34 spatial datasets. For example, a transport network and 5,000 scale of Spain is a one spatial net of network transport. Other question, one spatial net for themes and scale. If you have 6 scales, you have 204 spatial dataset. Or the spatial dataset or the spatial object at major level and national coverage. Administrative unit has 6 features. There will be 372 feature report. But in Spain, the option in Spain was all spatial lists and all themes and all scales and all levels and all organizations. In this type, you can see the number of spatial dataset each year. Our record was in 2010 in 5,219 spatial dataset, but the last year was 300. we have seen decrease of spatial dataset. Well, the list of spatial datasets were different each year because the requirement each year was different. The list of spatial data isn't established. The priority spatial dataset missing. Some spatial dataset regional don't cover all territory, and the type of spatial dataset aren't the same. Some responsible for spatial dataset didn't know how to sort their spatial dataset because when the spatial dataset isn't conformat, it's very difficult to sort the theme. For example, production of mollusk zones, house forest inventory, pharmacies. What is the themes? And the most of the datasets on the list are in conformat. The percent conformity in the last years was very low, about 1%. So Spain don't implement Spire. Didn't implement, sorry. No. The monitoring in 2015 was the metadata, no problem. The conformat metadata, no problem. But the problem was the conformity of spatial dataset and the conformity of network service. I'm sorry. Well, and the conformity, the accessibility. Then Spain wrote an action plan. This plan, the main concept is the involvement of the environment community in the implementation of the SPI directive, to find priority environment data and to report spatially with national cover. The conformity of the spatial dataset for Annex 1 will be 100% in November this year. The action plan has established all metadata, accessible through the same discovery service, the same discovery in the same catalog. All specialized Annex 1 will be 100% conformity by this year, alias one SPIRE, comprise SPIRE dataset at national level, and to remove perception that the organization have the complexity of SPIRE implementation. SPIRE is easy. Yes. I compare the 2016 and 2015. The most important is decrease of the spatial dataset in all ANES, in 1, 2, and 3 ANES. In the last year, spatial dataset has metadata, has conformat metadata, and the accessibility is increased. And the conformity, we pass the 1 and 10%. In the Annex 1 is the 37. Is figures in May, in the last May, but I hope in this year, in November, it will be in Annex 1 100%. The network service is the same feature. And where are these spatial dataset and service? Was in the same catalog. The name is Official Catalog of SPIRE Dataset and Service. There are spatial dataset and service according to action plan, and the metadata is the same in the European catalog and the page on the page EONet. I generate the file to EONet by SPI official monitoring dashboard. I put the catalog service web endpoint and it's automatic. So the harvesting is automatic and the reporting now is automatic. The last monitoring was manual. There are a lot of problems. Now it's impossible. It's one file is the same file. Well, the next step action plan, to continue setting in the list spatial dataset and service, finalize the list of priority dataset and to help identify needs to environment spatial dataset, identify spatial dataset with national coverage, to meet the deadline of SPIRE directive, spatial dataset for Annex 1, November this year, and spatial dataset for Annex 2 and 3 in 20. and to coordinate the responsible for spatial dataset. And the last question is, in this action plan similar to another action plans for other countries, is possible to compare the monitoring in all countries in Europe? Pues thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paloma. I'm going to open the floor immediately, but I will come back later after questions from the audience. So, questions. This is, from Spain, a very typical approach methodology to comply to INSPIRE obligations by limiting the amount of data sets and by identifying these data sets that are of highest relevant. And I can imagine that the list of priority data sets is very welcome now, but because it will provide extra guidance. And it will provide some clarity for the member states what the expectations of the Commission. So I think this would be good. I think it's good for you. I hope you're using it as an instrument right now, and you will develop it together with us, with the Commission and the other member states, and then come to a common understanding of the expectations of the Commission and develop pan-European products. So I think that's the outcome, and I think this is a very good start, and could be a good practice for some member states to adopt too. So I saw a question from Martin. Please, Martin.
Yeah, it's just the comment that I don't know if you've seen the presentation in the workshop, I think on Tuesday, made by Jiří Hradec. He was actually presenting the maturation of the infrastructures across the Europe. And also he mentioned your country, and it was very nice to see how graphically all these figures you just presented were there presented and also interpreted. And it was very nicely said that it was consolidated, and actually this is something what we think it's very important to keep eye on that, because as Yuri said, that if there are certain expectations on the Commission side, and there are also certain expectations on the member states, and we are also discussing with the data producers where shall be that border, the delineation, what shall go to the Europe, what makes sense to keep on national level. So just some observation that you can have a look on this work made by Jiří, and also it's also very important how you communicate and interpret the results of this kind of activities, even if sometimes figures are going down. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. I have to agree with Martin, of course. We don't want to be your only client. We want to be part of your processes of distributing data to a larger community, which the Commission is part of. And we've got regulatory obligations, and we want to limit the burdens. And if you are able to set up a process that satisfies the needs of several communities, several users at the same time, and satisfy the regulatory obligations you have under the environmental directives and under the INSPIRE directive, that would be the final objective, I think. So thank you very much, Paloma. And then I suppose that we move on to the next speaker, which is going to be Inne. Welcome, Inne. And Inne is going to talk to us or inform us about the synergy with INSPIRE in the Netherlands. So please, Inne, go ahead.
Yes.
Do you find your? Yeah, you will find your presentation. Okay, thank you. And Inne works at Novum.
Okay, that's there. Hello, my name is Ines Visser, as you said. I'm working in the Netherlands at Novum. Novum is the coordination office for INSPIRE in the Netherlands. I will talk to you about our experience with e-reporting, mostly from the last half year, because that's a very actual issue on the moment for us. So in the talks we have with our official reporters for all different environmental obligations, they told us that double transmission of data to the European Commission should be prevented, and that they only want to provide their data only once to the European Commission. And also that the data should be available to everybody who is interested in those data. What he also mentioned to us is that for them the reporting obligation has more priority than Inspire. So for Inspire Coordination Office, that's not a very nice message, but we have it in our head, so we try to solve this problem. And so the consequence could be that only the data should be provided for the environmental obligations to the, in most cases, the EEA, and Inspire services and harmonization for Annex 3 data shouldn't be available. So the required situation is that as we look at protected site data, on the lower level, that's the Inspire line. And there, if the data should be transferred to Inspire and provided with GML in a download service and also view services. Above, there's the required situation to provide the data to the AA with a transformation to the CDDA data model in XML and GML files, and upload this separately to ReportNet. So the danger is that the Inspire requirements never will be fulfilled. In this situation, we have very kind data provided, so for the protected sites it's not a problem, but for all other Annex 3 data types, that will be the situation. So what is required for CDDA for the protected sites? CDDA stands for the Common Database on Designated Protected Areas, and is based on the protected site Inspire data model. So in purple, that's what the EA called type 1 data. And that's in this case what's required also by Inspire. And in blue, that's the so-called type 2 data. And yesterday we had also a discussion on the point. But that also contains a lot of environmental data in our opinion. And there's also type 3 data, which is more reports, textual information. We have another situation if we look at the industrial emissions. If we look at what is there called type 1, that is the location of the industrial plant. Type 2 is the environmental data, and type 3 the contextual information. But if you look at what falls in type 2 category for industrial emissions, that are the emissions themselves. In our opinion, that should be the data available through Inspire, because that's the environmental data, and the location of the industry or of the plant is not that much interesting. It's just a location where things happened, and we are interested in what is happening there. So the danger is that all those emissions will not become available to all stakeholders. Activities, that's not for this presentation of much interest, but we talked a lot of all responsible reporters which are on this moment actual and in revision or in discussion. And what we are now doing is to look at the problems, to look at our task, because we want to provide the data through Inspire as services, and also make those data available for everybody and only once in one data stream. So what we are doing is we are developing a tool together with WeTransform. So it's also at their stand, so perhaps you can have a look if you're interested. It's based on the Inspire data, and we have to extend it with the type 2 data. It's possible to add some more information because the name of the reporter and the reporting year is not information you mostly have in your dataset itself. The data is transformed to the required data format by the EEA, and its data could be downloaded. So this is an automatic service. The only thing you have to do is, I will show it, but this tool is more or less the data stream. Input is your service, and it's an automatic transformation, and output is what you have to upload for the EA in ReportNet. Also, that has that you manually have to upload it has one voordeel. Advantage, thank you.
Benefit.
Benefit. Because at sometimes for member states it's they need a frozen situation, a legal situation for their reporting. So in this case, then you have also your frozen situation. If there are questions afterwards, you can go back to that file you have manually uploaded. The proof of concept to use the extended protect sites model developed by the EA. They have developed it, but didn't use it on the moment. The reporting tool I will tell a little bit more about. If you are interested, you can contact one of our GNOVM colleagues, so you can also use and test it yourself. And we like also to develop this tool further for other applications together with Commission, EEA, and interested member state. Yeah, the optimal situation, in our opinion, is that member states provide Inspire services extended with the data required for reporting, and that EEA, Commission, all other interested people can harvest it for their own applications. That should be the optimal situation in our opinion. On this moment, what we have developed is more a hybrid situation. At the lower right, there is, you see our automated transformation tool, which gives the required GML and XML files. So this is a hybrid situation. It's also important, I think, for the EA that the need for them to change their ReportNet is not that high, because this tooling gives them more time to develop it, and what should be uploaded is the same as before. So also member states which are not ready to provide their data through a service can still do it in old situation. And member states are ready to provide their data required for the reporting application can do it automated based on their services. What you have to do, go to HIL, and there is a project where you can select your reporting obligation. In this case it's CDDA, but I think it's a little bit too small to read. You upload your data, you point to your Inspire services containing your protect site data extended with the required data for the reporting. You add some more information like reporter name, year of reporting, which is not available in the dataset. Transform the data, and then you can download your required GML, XML, and upload it to ReportNet. So, very easy to use, in my opinion.
Thank you very much, Inna.
Okay.
This is a very complementary session. You touched on e-reporting right now. Paloma already started by showing that the fully automating or making the Inspire reporting fully automatic. That's what the Netherlands have done as well by reusing the emitted data. So we'll go to zero reporting for Inspire in a few years. And now you show us already a tool for all the rest of the reporting. Small remarks, CDDA is not a directive. It's part of the EONet data flows, core data flows, but it's not a directive. So, sorry, Miguel, I think it's right. So, but it's very interesting, and we're very looking forward to start using this kind of tool and using this tool in the context of the discussions we already had on Monday with the EEA and the follow-up on the Action 2016-5 on the priority data sets as well. So I think with EEA and the Commission and the Member States, we have a very powerful tool now to start working on this priority list and make sure that we can also, from the side of the Commission, better streamline our reporting obligations and use Inspire as a common process to do that. So I open up the floor. Sorry that I spoke before my turn, but I want to open the floor for questions to Inne on the tool, on the approach, on the methodology in general. So please. Martin.
Thanks a lot, really, for interesting effort. Just if I properly understood, it means that in practice, if this will happen and it will be in operational phase in the future, the practical consequence will be that once in a year, the data publisher will update their protected size service. They will run that procedures through the tool, and exported file will be uploaded to ROD.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Any more questions? Okay, Inne, thank you very much. And I would like to welcome now the last speaker of today, Thomas Petek, who will present us the situation in Slovenia for the Surveying and Mapping Authority.
Thank you,
Please
Mr.
go
Chairman.
ahead.
Just a moment to find. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, in the next few minutes I would like to share with you some experience about Inspire implementation in our country. I came from Slovenia, from Surveying and Mapping Authority of the Republic of Slovenia, which is national mapping and cadastral agency responsible also for coordination roles within the Inspire implementation process. The content of my presentation is following as it is written in this slide. So some words about the existing situation, and mainly I would like to share with you experiences when we try to combine OpenData initiative within eGovernment program in our country and with our Inspire implementation process. And of course, some words about the action plan and some conclusions. In last Country Fish, which was published recently, Slovenia have a relatively good picture with these smileys. Not all of them are green, but I believe that sooner or later these arrows will go more on north than on south. So if we are looking at this current situation, we could say that the only not very successful step was identification of spatial data set, which was already mentioned today. So we go through the list of spatial data sets which was established several years ago and try to identify some recent situation and clarify what kind of teams and what kind of data sets are on the list, and if they all have the legal background in some national legal acts and also relation with the international regulations. So, and of course there is a condition that it must be in digital format to cover the entire territory of the country. So this is the written in directive and also in our national law. And from those reasons, the number of identified spatial data set was a little bit decreased in also in Slovenia from the previous reporting period. So today we have in our on our list of spatial data sets 10 data providers with 130 data sets. It's not very much. It's more less than more. I believe that in future the number of spatial data sets would not growing very much, but we expect that the number of spatial data services and network services will grow extremely in the next reporting period. If we are speaking about coordination and other activities in implementation of INSPIRE obligations in Slovenia, I would like to say that after the bilateral meeting with the Commission 2 years ago, we prepared 1 year ago, we prepared action plan as a part of the regular yearly 3-year report, and this action plan was also accepted by Slovenian government because it was part of this report, and it is divided in this components: coordination and education and awareness raising, if I say, and then metadata, network services, and interoperability. Each of those group of actions has clearly defined milestones and also the responsible institutions which and agencies which must to act within this action plan. For faster implementation, we start also one of the European co-founded project called eSpatial. It was started last year, and within this project, one part of activities are closely related with implementation of INSPIRE obligations, mainly with the data sets from Annex 1 and partly Annex 2, but this will be, let's say, possibility to speed up a little bit this production of network services and also the activities regarding the transformation of data sets. At the same time, the Ministry of Public Authority in the Republic of Slovenia, which is responsible for e-government activities, they also open so-called Slovenian data portal as a part of European data portal, and we have several communication with them to identify and find out solutions how to avoid the overlapping of activities, especially in the regarding of data sets which have a spatial component. So within this portal, the main activities were done or was oriented to OpenData initiative, because with the implementation of PSI directive in Slovenian national legislation, government decided that all data which are provided by state budget or state or governmental agencies have a status of public sector information, and mainly this public sector information should be available freely to all purposes for all users without any obstacles. And in that case, also the spatial data are understood as a public sector information, and mostly all of those spatial data sets provided by national governmental agencies and ministries will be, or they are already as freely available. So to avoid the overlapping or duplication of work, we communicate with this with colleagues who are working on the OpenData portal of Slovenia. There is a link of those portal, and also we participate in establishing the OpenData action plan for the establishment of a system of open access to publicly founded research data in Slovenia, and also other, not only the research, also other public data in Slovenia. Minister of Public Authority prepare also the manuals on opening of public sector information, and with this within these manuals also the spatial components is somehow let's say elaborated. And from those reasons we decide to come closer with of course connecting national geoportal or Slovenian INSPIRE geoportal, where metadata system is established already several years, And within this metadata system, we have described not only the spatial data sets which are compliant with Inspire, but also other spatial data sets. And from those reasons, we decided to add additional category. Which of those spatial data sets has fulfilled the obligation of open data? And those one were harvesting directly to this open data portal in Slovenia. This was done simply with some kind of comparison tables related with the so-called metadata description according to Inspire metadata regulation, and the metadata description in several other projects, or also the open data program. And after that, this new category was added. One category is Inspire, another is open data, and I believe that there will be some additional ones and which allow direct harvesting to the open data portal. Those metadata descriptions of spatial data sets which are compliant with the request or the definitions. All this was done within or is part of the so-called State Cloud Computing Platform, which was also provided by Ministry of Public Authorities for all governmental agencies and ministries in the Republic of Slovenia. So this is, like, let's say, infrastructure for so-called distribution environment, for environment where the data and information about the data are distributing to the users. Related with other European and global policy developments and initiatives, we try to avoid duplication as much as possible. It's not always an easy task, but we try to be so coordinated between each of those initiatives that we use the same principle or almost the experiences from one let's say group of people or ministries or agencies within the country and to coordinate with let's say other part. There was just several experiences within the ISA program, within the European Location Framework activities, and where Ministry of Public Authorities contact point, and let's say Inspire activities, or also the ELF project activities, where Slovenian Mapping Authority were let's say coordinator or contact point. This approach we would like to implement also in cooperation with other global policy developments and initiatives, of course. So if I try to conclude my presentation, because this is the only obstacle between me and you and our coffee break, and I would like to just say that the general principle is that in Slovenia all data sets and services provided for public money is now kind part of the public infrastructure, or data and services are used for implementing the public tasks, but also for the commercial purposes. It is now more or less available, freely available. So we are convinced that core data sets are available in a relatively sufficient amount and or detail, but of course there is a lot of challenges in front of us for the data sets which are related with teams in Annex 3, which is in front of us now. So services are more or less under development or in pilot or testing phases just now, because it is relatively new topics which was not very popular or widely recognized in the past. And we are trying to come closer with cooperation with research, education, and private sector, because at the moment all these activities are more or less oriented to fulfill the obligations and roles of public sector. But we believe that only together with all other sectors, the spatial data infrastructure in our country will be used appropriate and sustainable in the future. So thank you very much for the
Thank you very much, Thomas. And you actually succeeded in even complementing the previous speakers by adding the discussion on the use of the Public Service Information Directive, which is coming up and can help us as well to further align the legal framework of data sharing across Europe, which is very important. We might come back to this briefly later on. You also added the cloud aspect of infrastructure, which will probably make the overall cost of hosting an infrastructure for a large community of people much more cost efficient in the future. And there is a session on cloud, the use of cloud Inspire implementation tomorrow. So that may be very valuable as well. So I would like to open, we still got some time for discussions and questions. First some questions for Thomas, and then we might come back to the other presentations as well. So please, if you have questions, go ahead. Oh, everybody was very impressed. Well, then I have a question, and maybe it's also a question for Martin. I already discussed it with Martin. We had a small discussion in the beginning of the week. But you are aware of the fact that when you talk about alignment with eGovernment, that we have inserted an action in the eGovernment action plan. I got the impression that not much people are using this aspect of policy making into the national discussions. I think it would be a good driver if you start a discussion with e-government people and looking for synergy. Well, that's the start for discussing. There is an action 14, that says that we have to fully implement Inspire, more or less, in the e-government action plan. So that would be a good, and I don't know if you're using this already in the discussions.
We start with within the discussion because maybe our benefit is that Slovenia is a relatively small country, and so people between ministries know each other maybe more than in biggest and more complex administration structures. And at the moment we have relatively good and well cooperation with, as I say, Ministry of Public Authorities, and also within the implementing the ISA action program, and also we try to combine these efforts with implementing Inspire and action maintenance and implementation program of Inspire. So it's not fast activities, they are usually need some time, but we try to following this discussion also, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Very good approach, I think. I think a lot of member states are having this issue that is saying with implementing Inspire, we're also doing e-government and OpenData. And OpenData and e-government is higher on the political agenda, so unfortunately we don't have any budget. Well, we kind of agreed for several years now that it's actually the same. Inspire is providing the environmental services for e-government, so it's a part of e-government. And we're trying to also align the legal frameworks, and that's where it comes in the discussion on the reuse of the PSI directive. We also have, it's an internal action of the Commission, we do a review of the Article 17. Not really a review, but we're doing a study to see how we can better align the Article 17 on data sharing with the use of the PSI, of Public Service Information Directive, and that will give you also the legal framework on which you can work and further align open data and Inspire initiatives, I hope, in the near future. So the study will kick off Q3, so soon, of this year, and probably by next year we will have some recommendations that might lead us to change to Article 17 or replacement by reference to the use of PSI. So that would be the roadmap that we have in view for even better alignment between data sharing under Inspire and open data. So again, if you have any questions for the other speakers, so we had a great presentation this morning and a very hopeful one. Thank you very much, Thomas. I saw Marcus presenting that in Germany they will go for full semantic interoperability for long-term benefits. Very promises. You also said that there's some work for the Commission to better streamline some of the regulation they have, and that's right. And that's what we're doing under the fitness check for environmental monitoring and reporting, and even higher across different directorate generals under better regulation. Then we had Martin, I think. We had Martin after. Yeah, then we had Martin we introduced the alignments of OpenData and eGovernment to start with, and very hopeful as well because they're coming closer to each other. Also, he highlighted the use of the country fishes to better plan your resources at national level and go and start working with recommendations and the expectations the commissions have to better define the scope of your Inspire efforts on implementing introduced us to e-reporting and provided us with a new tool to do the automatic e-reporter under the environmental acquis, which was conferred by Paloma before her. She said we're already doing the fully Inspire automated reporting. We're ready for the future because by this and 2 years we will go to zero reporting under Inspire as well, where the full reuse of an existing obligation being metadata. So you won't have to write reports anymore, hopefully, but you can provide it automatically. And she also introduced us to a methodology used in Spain to limit the implementation scope, not really limit the implementation scope, but to solve some of the issues of scale in Spain and national data sets versus regional, local data sets. So it's a good approach that might be valuable for some other member states as well. So if you're interested, discuss with her and Emilio or have a look at it afterwards. And then we got Thomas, who actually added extra viewpoints by introducing us to the use of the Public Sector Information Directive as a way to create synergy between the open data and Inspire communities and the cloud platform, which we only briefly highlighted on the site, which might be very valuable if your infrastructure gets really successful. And if you could become part of eGovernment services, then you will serve a large cloud of people, and the Inspire obligations on the services is only limited to serving 20 people simultaneously. So that's not enough, that's what we are aware of. It only provides you a mean to open up your data and implement data sharing if you want to be very performant in your services to the public in general, citizens and private companies and the Commission, then you might consider a modern infrastructure based on cloud computing. That would be an option. And if you've got a state cloud, perfect. I think very few member states have a state cloud for the moment. So we would think it would be very good to look in this a little bit further in the coming meetings of the MIG as well. So that's it from my side. That's what I took away from this. Besides the remark that Marcus said, we have to do some better streamlining. I also remember that we should keep up doing the work on the country fishes on our side. And I think a lot of these things will come back in the upcoming maintenance implementation group meetings as well, when we go over this conference in December together with the member states. So from my side, if there are, I don't know if there are any questions on my conclusions or on the other presentations, then nope. Then I would like to thank you very much. I would like to thank our speakers and close this session. Thank you.